The day after the divorce, she checked into a cheap motel with her baby unaware, the man next door. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main story. The day after her heartbreaking divorce, Emma checked into a cheap motel, holding her baby tightly in her arms. Little did she know, the man next door was about to change her life forever. Emma let out a shaky breath as she closed the door behind her. The smell of cheap cleaning products hit her, mixing with the stale air of the low-budget motel room. The fluorescent light flickered above, casting an eerie glow. She glanced around ugly patterned wallpaper, a worn-out couch, and a small bed that barely fit in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was all she could afford after the whirlwind that had been the last few weeks. Divorce papers, moving out, a mess of emotions, shattered plans, and now this. She couldn't help but feel a wave of shame wash over her. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life turning out. She'd thought she had everything figured out. But now, she was here, in a rundown motel, starting over with nothing but her baby and a few belongings stuffed into a suitcase. Emma sank onto the bed, her baby cradled in her arms. The baby cooed softly, oblivious to the storm raging in her mother's heart. Emma wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. She didn't want her baby to see her cry. She had to be strong, for her. As she settled into the bed, she heard a knock at the door. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Who could it be? She wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitantly, she got up and opened the door, only to be greeted by the sight of a man standing in the hallway. He was dressed in a suit, looking out of place in this rundown part of town. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his sharp jawline clean-shaven, and his posture exuded confidence. He wasn't exactly the type to be staying in a motel like this. "Hi," he said, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Emma blinked, unsure of what to say. Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. He gave a polite smile, though there was something guarded in his demeanor. "Sorry to bother you, but I think I may have left my wallet in your room," he said, his tone calm, but with a slight edge of uncertainty. Emma's brow furrowed in confusion. "I haven't seen anything," she replied. He took a step closer, his eyes flicking to the baby in her arms. "Are you sure?" "I was just staying in the room next door." Emma paused for a moment, trying to make sense of the situation. What was a man like him doing in a place like this? But before she could say anything, the baby started crying. Emma's gaze snapped to her baby, her heart aching. The man hesitated for a moment, before taking a step back. "I'll leave you to it," he said softly. And before she could respond, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Emma closed the door, her mind racing. What was that about? Was he really looking for his wallet, or was it just an excuse to talk to her? She shook her head and walked back to the bed, trying to focus on calming her baby. But the encounter left her with more questions than answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was different, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Little did Emma know, that brief encounter with the man next door would change the course of her life in ways she could never have imagined. What started as a simple act of chance, a chance meeting between two strangers, was about to turn into something much bigger, something that would rewrite the story of her life. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of her baby cooing softly in her arms. The dim light coming through the thin curtains painted the room in shades of gray, matching her mood. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the man from the night before. Why had he been staying at the motel? What was his real story? She shook her head, trying to focus on the present. She had enough on her plate without wondering about the man next door. Her baby needed her, and that was what mattered. But the man's brief appearance left her with a feeling she couldn't shake. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was something about him that felt different, something genuine. The day passed slowly, with Emma trying to settle into the rhythm of her new life. She spent the morning cleaning the small motel room, organizing her few belongings. The evening arrived, and she found herself sitting in the quiet of the room, nursing her baby. It had been a long, tiring day, but she tried to remind herself that this was just a new chapter, one she would eventually get used to. She was starting over, after all. She was strong enough to handle this. As night fell, Emma went through her routine. She gently rocked her baby to sleep, trying to ignore the persistent noise in the hallway. The sound of doors opening and closing, the distant hum of the television from another room, all seemed to blend together in a constant background noise that didn't allow her to think. Just as she was about to lay her baby down in the crib, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't been expecting anyone. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was the man from the night before. She quickly walked over to the door and peeked through the small crack. To her surprise, it was him again, the man from the room next door. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, standing in the hallway with a soft, almost apologetic smile. Emma blinked, unsure of how to respond. What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He shrugged slightly. "I wanted to apologize for last night. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable," he said, his tone sincere. I felt something about you. I don't know, but I wanted to make sure you're okay." Emma was taken aback by his words. Nobody had ever approached her like this before, not in her current situation. Her heart raced, unsure of how to react. "I'm fine," she said quickly, not wanting to show any weakness. She glanced at her baby, who had started to stir in the crib. The man's eyes followed her gaze. "I can see you're busy, but I just wanted to make sure you're okay," he said again, this time his voice softer. There was something comforting in the way he spoke, something genuine that made Emma feel less alone. She swallowed hard, then nodded. "Thank you," she said, not quite sure what else to say. The man smiled warmly. "No problem. I just wanted to make sure." He turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "If you ever need anything, just let me know. I'm in room 10. Emma nodded again, too stunned to say much more. As he walked away, she stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of confusion and something else, hope maybe. She wasn't sure. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Emma went through the motions of getting ready for bed, though her thoughts kept drifting back to the man next door. Why had he been so concerned? Why had he offered help when she hadn't even asked? She couldn't understand it, but she found herself wondering if he could somehow be the answer to all the questions swirling in her mind. The next morning, as Emma stepped outside to grab a coffee from the small vending machine by the office, she saw him again, the man from the night before. This time, he was standing outside his room, talking to the motel manager. When he saw her, he gave her a small wave. Emma smiled back, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Was this a coincidence? Or was he making an effort to be around her? She quickly pushed the thought out of her mind and turned away, focusing on the coffee. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning of something she wasn't yet ready to understand. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma, each one blending into the next as she adjusted to the new reality of her life. She spent most of her time in the small motel room, taking care of her baby, trying to keep her head above water. The world outside felt like it was moving at a pace she couldn't keep up with. She tried to distract herself by organizing the few things she had left, packing and unpacking the small suitcase she had brought with her. Every now and then, she would glance out the window, looking out at the street below, watching the world move as if she wasn't a part of it. She kept thinking about the man from the room next door, wondering what he really wanted. Was he just being kind? Or was there something more? Every time she saw him, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was different, that he wasn't like the other people she had met. The small interactions they had shared over the past few days left her with more questions than answers, and she found herself curious, maybe even a little hopeful. One morning, as she was packing up her things, she heard a knock at the door again. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her first thought was that it was the man from next door. She hesitated for a moment, but then went to the door and opened it. Standing there was the same man, looking as polished as ever in his suit, his hair neatly styled, and a warm smile on his face. "Hey, Emma," he said, his voice calm and friendly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Emma blinked in surprise. No, it's fine," she replied, a little caught off guard. What's going on? I wanted to check in again. Make sure you're okay, he said, his tone sincere. I've been thinking about you, and I wanted to see if you needed anything. If there's anything I can do to help. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know how to respond. She had never had someone offer help like this before, especially not someone she barely knew. She wanted to turn him down, to say that she didn't need help, but the truth was, she did. She was struggling more than she let on, and the thought of someone offering a helping hand felt like a lifeline she didn't deserve. I don't know what to say, she finally said, her voice shaking slightly. I've been doing okay, but it's been hard, you know. The man nodded, his expression softening. I get it. I really do, he said, taking a step closer. I've been in tough situations myself, but you don't have to do this alone. There was something in his words that made Emma want to believe him. Something in the kindness in his eyes that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her after all. She looked down at her baby, who was peacefully sleeping in her arms. She had been so focused on keeping herself together, on surviving, that she had forgotten what it meant to let others in, to trust again. I don't know if I'm ready to accept help, she said quietly. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure I deserve it. The man smiled gently, understanding in his eyes. You don't have to be ready, he said softly, and you don't have to feel like you deserve it. Sometimes, we all need help, and there's no shame in accepting it. You don't have to do everything alone. His words hit Emma harder than she expected, and she felt tears welling up in her eyes. She quickly blinked them away, not wanting to appear weak. The man didn't seem to notice. He just stood there, patiently, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. I guess it wouldn't hurt to accept some help, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. He nodded, his smile widening. You don't have to thank me, he said. I'm just glad you're willing to let me help. Emma felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, but also a sense of uncertainty. She wasn't sure where this would lead, or if it was the right decision. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The man stepped back and gave her a nod before walking away, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Emma closed the door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the start of something new, something that would change her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. Days passed, and Emma found herself thinking about the man next door more than she expected. His kindness had caught her off guard, and despite her hesitation, she couldn't deny that his offer had opened something inside of her, something she had locked away since her divorce. She spent the next few days trying to move forward, trying to keep herself busy with her daily routine, but it wasn't easy. The weight of her new life, her isolation, and her financial struggles hung over her like a cloud. But she started to wonder if maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Her baby was her world, and she focused on caring for her, but the man's words kept echoing in her mind. You don't have to do everything alone. Those words stayed with her, resonating deep within her, even as she continued her quiet, solitary life in the small motel room. One evening, after putting her baby to bed, she decided to step outside for a bit of air. The night was cool and calm, with a quiet stillness that matched the thoughts swirling in her head. She walked down the narrow corridor of the motel, the fluorescent lights flickering above, casting shadows on the walls. As she passed the door to his room, she hesitated. The thought of him, the man from next door, lingered in her mind. She was curious, maybe even a little nervous, but more than that, she was intrigued. Could he really be the person he seemed to be? Or was he just a stranger offering kindness with no strings attached? Before she could think too much about it, she found herself standing at his door, her hand hovering over the knob. She wasn't sure why she was here, but something inside told her that maybe, just maybe, it was time to talk. She knocked softly. A few moments later, the door opened. And there he was, standing in front of her, looking just as composed and put together as always. Emma, he said, a slight smile forming on his lips. What's going on? You look like you need to talk. Emma bit her lip, feeling the weight of her hesitation. She hadn't planned on coming here, but something about his kindness had drawn her in. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for, But at that moment, it didn't matter. I just wanted to thank you," she said, her voice soft. "For everything, for being so kind. I didn't think anyone would care." He looked at her with genuine concern in his eyes. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "It's the least I could do. You don't have to go through this alone." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had never felt so understood, so seen. It was as if, for the first time in a long while, someone actually cared. I don't know where to start," she admitted, looking down at her feet. "Everything feels like it's falling apart." He stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. "Why don't you come in for a bit? Let's talk." Emma hesitated for a moment, but then walked inside. The room was simple but comfortable, much like his demeanor, calm, inviting, and peaceful. She sat down on the couch as he closed the door behind them. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to talk to, someone who didn't judge her, someone who didn't see her as a failure. As she began to speak, telling him about her struggles, about the divorce, and about the overwhelming loneliness she had been feeling, he listened without interrupting. His presence was reassuring, like a calm in the middle of a storm. She felt herself relax, for the first time, allowing herself to open up completely. As the conversation continued, she learned more about him. His name was Liam Parker, and he wasn't just a guy staying in the room next door. He was a successful tech entrepreneur, a millionaire, but it didn't feel important. What mattered was how he treated her, how he cared enough to check in on her, to listen without judgment. He wasn't trying to fix her problems. He was simply there to help. She started to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was small, just a flicker, but it was there. He didn't push her, didn't try to rush her into making any decisions. He was patient, understanding, and kind. As the conversation came to a natural pause, Liam gave her a soft smile. "You're not alone, Emma," he said quietly. "You have people who care, and I'm here if you need anything." His words settled in her heart, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe there was a way out of the darkness. Maybe things could get better. Not all at once, but step by step. She stood up slowly, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know how much this means to me." Liam nodded, his expression warm. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And remember, I'm just next door." As she left his room and walked back to her own, Emma felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in months. She wasn't sure where this would lead, or if she was ready for whatever might come next, but she knew one thing for certain: for the first time in a long while, she had a chance. A chance to rebuild, to trust, and to let herself believe in something better. The days that followed felt different for Emma. There was a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time, a subtle shift that came from her conversation with Liam. He hadn't tried to fix everything, but his kindness had planted a seed of hope in her, one she hadn't realized she was still capable of nurturing. Every time she thought about it, she felt lighter, as if the weight of her world had been slightly lifted. It wasn't that everything was perfect now, far from it, but for the first time, Emma felt like maybe, just maybe, she could make it through. The days were still long, and the struggle to make ends meet was ever present, but there was a flicker of light in her life now, a glimmer of something that felt real and lasting. Every time she saw Liam in the hallway or heard a knock on her door, she couldn't help but smile. He didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't expect anything other than to help her when she needed it most. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to her. One evening, after a long day of running errands and taking care of her baby, Emma sat down to a quiet dinner in her room. The baby was asleep, and for the first time that day, Emma allowed herself to take a deep breath. She was sitting at the small table in the corner of the room, staring at the food in front of her, when there was a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stood up quickly, wondering who it could be. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for a brief moment, she felt a flutter of nerves. She opened the door to find Liam standing there again, with a smile on his face. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice warm. Emma smiled, her nerves easing at the sight of him. "No, not at all," she replied. "What's going on?" Liam looked at her for a moment, as if deciding whether to say something, and then held up a small package. "I thought you might need this," he said. "It's not much, but I figured it could help." Emma looked at the package, confused. "What is it?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. He handed her the package, which was light but carefully wrapped. Emma unwrapped it slowly, revealing a small grocery gift card. "I know things are tough right now," Liam said gently. "And I don't want to overstep, but I thought you could use a little help. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she stared at the card in her hands. It wasn't just the gift, it was the thought behind it, the fact that Liam had remembered her struggle and taken the time to offer a little relief. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "You really don't have to do this." Liam smiled, his eyes kind. "I know, but sometimes it's the small things that make the biggest difference." Emma felt tears sting her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She didn't want to cry, not now, not in front of him. She had always prided herself on being strong, on handling things on her own, but there was something about Liam's kindness that made her want to let down her guard, to accept that it was okay to need help sometimes. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "This means more to me than you know." "You don't have to say anything," Liam said softly. "Just take care of yourself and your baby. That's all that matters." For a moment they stood there in silence, the weight of the moment settling between them. Emma felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of gratitude and something else she couldn't quite put her finger on. She hadn't expected her life to take this turn. She hadn't expected to find someone who cared, who saw her, really saw her, for who she was, not just the struggling single mom, but someone worth helping. Liam's simple act of kindness had given her a sense of security she hadn't known she needed. "Thank you again," she said, smiling at him through the tears she had managed to hold back. "You're welcome," he replied, his smile softening. "And don't forget, if you ever need anything, I'm right here." As he turned to leave, Emma watched him walk down the hallway, the weight of the world suddenly feeling just a little bit lighter. She closed the door and leaned against it, allowing herself to breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. She wasn't sure what the future held, or where this path with Liam would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like there was hope. Real hope. It wasn't just a fleeting feeling, but something that had taken root inside her, something that was slowly growing stronger with each passing day. And for the first time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. Over the next few weeks, Emma started to feel like a new chapter of her life was slowly beginning. Each day felt like a small victory. She was still adjusting to the reality of her new life, living in a cheap motel, constantly worried about how she would make ends meet, but the moments of peace, however brief, started to feel more meaningful. Her baby's laughter became the music that lifted her spirits, and every small kindness she received from Liam felt like a reminder that maybe life didn't have to be as difficult as it had been. The grocery gift card he had given her was the first step. It wasn't just the food she was able to buy. It was the sense of dignity it restored. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a burden. That simple gesture gave her a renewed sense of hope. But still, the thought of accepting too much help weighed on her. She had been fiercely independent her whole life. Asking for help had never come easy. But Liam had a way of making her feel comfortable, like it was okay to lean on someone else once in a while. She started to look forward to their brief encounters in the hallways, those small exchanges that meant more than she cared to admit. It wasn't just about the help he offered. It was about how he made her feel seen, heard, and cared for. One afternoon, as she was getting ready to go out for a walk with her baby, she heard a familiar knock at the door. She hesitated, unsure of what this visit would bring. It had been a few days since she'd last seen Liam, and she wasn't sure how to react. She opened the door to find him standing there, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "I thought you might like these," he said with a gentle smile. Emma blinked in surprise. "Flowers?" she asked, momentarily lost for words. "I didn't know if you'd like them, but I figured it was worth a shot," he replied, stepping forward to hand her the bouquet. Emma took the flowers, the fresh scent filling the small space of the room. She could hardly believe it. No one had ever given her flowers, especially not for no reason at all. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice soft. She could feel the warmth spreading through her chest as she looked at the vibrant colors in her hands. Liam shrugged, his smile never wavering. "It's just a small gesture, but I thought you deserved it," he said. She was silent for a moment, trying to process what was happening. The gesture, the kindness, it was all too much, and yet it felt so right. Emma had spent so long in survival mode, never allowing herself to be open, to accept the good things that might come her way. And now, here was Liam, offering her something as simple as flowers, showing her that kindness could exist without any hidden agenda. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. "I really appreciate it," she said, finally finding her voice. "It means more than you know." Liam nodded, his eyes softening. "You deserve more than just a bouquet, Emma," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "You deserve someone who sees you for who you really are." His words hit her unexpectedly. She had always thought of herself as just a single mom struggling to get by, someone whose life had fallen apart. But Liam didn't see her that way. He saw her as someone deserving of kindness, of love, of more than just survival. She felt a surge of emotion. But before she could say anything, he smiled again. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And if you need anything, I'm just next door." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with the bouquet in her hands, her heart full of feelings she wasn't sure how to process. She closed the door and leaned against it, holding the flowers close to her chest. The quiet of the room felt comforting, but also full of possibilities. She didn't know what to do with the feelings that were stirring inside her. She wasn't used to feeling this vulnerable, this open. But there was something about Liam's kindness, his unwavering support, that made her believe in the possibility of a different life. She glanced at her baby, who was now awake, smiling up at her. The future was still uncertain, and the challenges of her life were far from over. But for the first time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She wasn't sure where this path with Liam would lead, but she knew she couldn't keep pushing people away, not anymore. As she looked down at the flowers, she realized that this was just the beginning. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope, a sense that maybe, with a little help, she could start to build something better. The days following the unexpected gift of flowers felt surreal for Emma. She had spent most of her life being strong, relying only on herself to survive. But Liam's kindness kept pushing her walls down, one small gesture at a time. Each encounter with him left her feeling a little more open, a little more willing to embrace the world around her, a world she had long closed herself off from. It was strange to her how a stranger's kindness could do more for her than years of struggling alone. She began to find herself thinking about him more, wondering who he really was beneath the surface. There was more to him, she knew that much, but the mystery of his life kept her intrigued. She knew he was successful, but he never flaunted it. He was just there. And somehow, that made him different from everyone else she had met. One evening, after a long day, Emma was sitting by the window, looking out at the fading sunset, when she heard a knock at her door. Her heart raced, wondering who it might be. She had started to feel a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation whenever she heard a knock now, knowing it could be him. She opened the door to find Liam standing there once again, his usual smile in place, but this time there was something different in his eyes, a kind of intensity she hadn't seen before. "I was wondering if you'd like to join me for dinner," he said, his voice casual. But there was an undercurrent of something more, something unspoken. Emma blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. She hadn't expected this dinner with Liam. She had spent so much time focused on her own survival that the idea of spending time with anyone outside of her baby felt strange. But there was something in his gaze that made her want to say yes, something that pulled at her in a way she couldn't explain. "Dinner?" she repeated, unsure of herself. "Yes," he said with a small chuckle. "I know a small place not far from here. Thought it might be nice to get out for a while, maybe talk." Emma hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to cross that line. What would dinner mean? Was it just two people sharing a meal, or something more? But as she stood there, staring at him, she realized that perhaps it was time to step out of the shadows she had been hiding in. She needed to stop being afraid of what might happen, and just live in the moment. "Okay," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. "I'd like that." Liam's smile grew warmer, and for a moment, Emma felt something inside her relax. She wasn't sure what this would lead to, but she felt a quiet excitement stirring deep inside her, something that had been absent for so long. As they left the motel room and walked down the narrow corridor, Emma's thoughts swirled. She hadn't been on a date in so long, hadn't allowed herself to even think about relationships or connections since the divorce. She had closed herself off to those possibilities, convinced that she wasn't worthy of them. But now, with Liam, something was different. She wasn't just a woman struggling to get by, she was someone deserving of kindness and maybe even love. The small cafe they arrived at was cozy and warm, its charm coming from the simple decor and the quiet atmosphere. It was a world away from the cold, sterile motel, and Emma found herself feeling more comfortable than she expected. As they sat down at the table, the soft hum of conversations from other patrons filled the air. But it felt like they were in their own little world. Liam asked about her life, her hopes, and her dreams, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt comfortable sharing. She talked about the gallery she had always dreamed of opening, about her passion for painting, and how, even after everything had fallen apart, she still held on to that dream. As she spoke, she realized that she wasn't just talking about a dream from her past. She was talking about a future she still wanted to build. Liam listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, as if he was truly interested in what she had to say. It was a simple thing, but it made her feel heard, something she had longed for. After they finished dinner, they stepped outside into the cool evening air. Liam walked her back to the motel, and for a brief moment, the silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. As they reached the door to her room, Emma turned to him, unsure of what to say. "Thank you for dinner," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "It was nice." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," Liam replied with a soft smile. "You deserve nice things, Emma." His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. She stood there for a moment, unsure if she was ready to say goodbye, but before she could say anything else, Liam leaned in slightly, as if debating something, and then placed a gentle kiss on her cheek. The touch was light, but it sent a shock of warmth through her. She was taken aback, her breath catching in her throat. He pulled away slightly, looking at her with an expression that was both gentle and sincere. "Good night, Emma," he said softly, before turning and walking away. Emma stood there for a long moment, her hand resting on the door as she tried to process what had just happened. She wasn't sure what the future held, or what this connection with Liam meant, but she knew one thing for sure. Something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, she was open to the possibility of more, to the idea that life could be different, better even. And as she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, she felt a sense of peace settle over her, knowing that she was ready to take the next step. Whatever that step was, she would take it, and she wouldn't be walking alone. The next few days felt like they were unfolding in slow motion for Emma. She couldn't help but replay the events of the night before in her mind, the soft kiss on her cheek, the warmth of Liam's smile. She had always prided herself on being independent, but now, with each passing day, she found herself yearning for something more, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years' hope. The small things that Liam had done for her, the kindness he had shown, made her wonder if it was possible to have something good again. Could she really let herself believe that a new beginning was possible? Could she truly rebuild her life, not just for herself but for her baby too? Her baby. She glanced down at the little one, peacefully sleeping in her arms. She had to get things right for the little girl who depended on her. But, at the same time, she realized that maybe it was okay to lean on someone else too. Maybe she didn't have to do everything alone. That thought was still so new to her, still so foreign, but it was starting to feel more comfortable. Emma was still nervous about where this new path with Liam might lead. But there was a part of her that was ready to take the next step, however uncertain it might be. She knew that she couldn't just keep hiding from life, from what could be. The morning came and went with the usual quiet routine. But there was a new energy in the air. When Liam knocked at her door again, she felt a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. She opened it to find him standing there with his usual calm demeanor. But there was something different about him today. He wasn't just offering a simple gesture of kindness, he was looking at her with something more, something she wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. "Hey, Emma," he greeted her warmly. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I wanted to talk to you about something." She felt a surge of curiosity, but also a hint of anxiety. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice steady but soft. Liam hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, his eyes meeting hers. "I know you've been through a lot, and I can't pretend to understand what it's like, but I want to be here for you, if you'll let me." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had heard these words before people had told her they were there for her. But with Liam, it felt different. His sincerity was palpable, and it made her feel like maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. "I'm not saying we have to figure everything out right now," he continued, "but I want to help you build something. Not just for you, but for both of you." He gestured toward her baby, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not alone in this, Emma. You've got someone who cares, and I'm not going anywhere." Emma swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to think about the possibility of a life that wasn't just about surviving, but about thriving. She looked at Liam, really looked at him, and saw not just the man who had helped her, but the man who was offering her a chance at something more. She had spent so long running from everything, from the hurt, from the uncertainty, from the fear of opening up again. But now, standing in front of her was someone who wanted to help her rebuild. Someone who saw her not just as a woman in need, but as someone worthy of love and care. "I don't know what to say," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been so afraid of letting people in, of trusting again. But you've shown me that it's okay to trust." Liam took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to be afraid of trusting me, Emma. I'm here for the long haul. We'll take it slow, and we'll figure things out together." The sincerity in his voice made Emma's heart race. She had spent so many years trying to do everything on her own, but now she realized that she didn't have to. She didn't have to carry the burden by herself. There was someone standing right beside her, someone who wanted to help her carry it, someone who wanted to see her succeed, not just survive. For the first time, Emma felt the heavy weight on her shoulders begin to lighten, not because the struggle was over, but because she wasn't facing it alone anymore. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know exactly what the future would look like. But standing there with Liam, she felt a small but undeniable sense of peace. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a way to rebuild her life, to trust again, and to believe in the possibility of happiness. As they stood there, in the quiet of the room, Emma knew that this was just the beginning of something new. Something that she had always longed for, but had never thought possible. With Liam by her side, she finally felt ready to take that next step, to move forward with hope and confidence, knowing that whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. As the days passed, Emma began to embrace the changes in her life with a newfound sense of hope. It was a quiet hope, one that grew slowly but steadily, like a small flame kindling in the dark. She was still staying in the same motel, but the place no longer felt like a prison. It was becoming a stepping stone, a place where she could begin to rebuild her life, piece by piece. She started to trust again, not just in Liam, but in herself. She had spent so much time doubting her worth, wondering if she was capable of more, but with each day, she grew stronger. Liam continued to be there for her, not as a savior, but as a companion, a friend, and perhaps something more. He never pressured her, never made her feel like she owed him anything. He simply offered support, and that was more than she had ever expected from anyone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the quiet motel courtyard, Emma found herself sitting outside, watching the world go by. Her baby was napping peacefully inside, and for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself a moment of stillness. She thought about the future, about the possibilities that now seemed open to her. Just a few months ago, she would have never imagined this life, one where she felt hopeful, where she believed in the idea of love and support again. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she felt a presence beside her. It was Liam. He had a cup of coffee in his hand, and his smile was warm and genuine as he sat down next to her. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice soft. Emma smiled, her heart beating a little faster at the sight of him. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She had come to realize just how much Liam had come to mean to her. It wasn't just the way he had helped her financially, or the way he had been there for her when she needed a friend. It was the way he made her feel seen, valued, and understood. For the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be happy. "You know," Liam said, taking a sip of his coffee, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about your dream." Emma turned to look at him, surprised. "My dream?" she asked, unsure what he meant. "Yeah," he said, smiling softly. "You've always wanted to open that art gallery, right? I think it's a great idea. And I want to help you make it happen." Emma felt a flutter in her chest. She hadn't realized that Liam had been listening so intently when she had talked about her passion for art, her dream of opening a gallery. It was something she had kept to herself for so long, unsure if it was even possible anymore. You really think I can do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam nodded, his expression serious. "I know you can. You've got the heart, the vision, and the strength. All you need is the right support." Emma stared at him, her mind racing. She had spent so long thinking that her dream was out of reach, that it was just a fantasy. But now, with Liam's words, she felt a shift deep within her. Maybe it wasn't too late to go after what she truly wanted. Maybe it wasn't impossible. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the weight of their conversation. For the first time, Emma felt like she wasn't just talking about her dreams in a distant, hopeful way. It was becoming real. She could actually do this. And with Liam's support, she might just be able to build the future she had always dreamed of. As the evening wore on, Liam and Emma sat together, talking about the future, about the steps they would take to make her dream a reality. Liam offered to help with everything from finding a space to securing funding, and Emma couldn't help but feel a rush of gratitude. She didn't know where this journey would take them, or what the future held. But for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She had someone who believed in her, who saw her potential, and who was willing to help her achieve her dreams. The thought of building a future, of having a real chance to follow her passion, filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma closed her eyes and thought about how far she had come. She had started this journey feeling broken, hopeless, and alone. But now, she felt like a new person. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she had the strength and the support to overcome them. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer afraid. She had Liam, she had her baby, and most importantly, she had herself. She was ready to start living, really living, and she couldn't wait to see what the future held.